Andy, as I was going back through the eclipse, by the way, were you an eclipse watcher?
Oh, my wife and I took a break, Dave. We sat on our porch. We took the eclipse in. We took some cool pictures through our lenses. It was pretty awesome. Pretty awesome. How about you?
I was not. I was stuck in like
That's right.
docking views, but I somebody sent me a couple good pictures, and I was like, "Oh, this is really cool." My wife did was she was working at the house and talked to our neighbors, and the neighbors were out on their porch, and they had the glasses. So my wife went over there, saw some cool. It was pretty cool, she said. So
Yeah.
I think the pictures were really awesome.
Yeah.
The NASA thing looked really cool. I mean, so I think people had a good time. Anyways, I was just thinking there, at least we're here today, Andy, because
Yeah.
the world did not end. I mean, that's a
Got it.
good thing. So I was thinking on my like, where do you go as a conspiracy theorist now? Like you spend all this time, you put up your YouTube stuff, you put up your reels, you did all that stuff. Where do you go now that your conspiracy theory or your end of the world prediction, now you look like an ass? Well, I mean, not that you weren't an ass before, but now you really look like an ass.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think for some of these folks, they play it as part of a bigger story, right? This is perhaps just one of the signs of the revelation, right? There's more to come. The locust invasion of 2024, maybe the next, sign of the apocalypse. For some, if you recall, this was a few years ago. There was an older gentleman who had predicted the coming of the end of the world on multiple occasions, and obviously, each time the end of the world didn't come. But his faithful like would prepare themselves, sell their personal goods and go out there. And some of these folks, I think, I think some honestly believe that they're reading the tea leaves and coming up with the answer and trying to help people. Some are just straight up charlatans. Either way, I mean, there's no good reading of the Bible where I think somebody's going to think that they actually can predict the coming of the end of the world, right? Because the whole
Jesus even says that in the Bible. He's like, you're
yeah,
not going to know the time.
that's what I'm saying. Like he says, there's no way that you can actually like you're not the code cracker, right? So like it should be automatically dismissed by everybody. Yet I think desperate people, a hungry people, an eager people, a wanting people can buy into it. And for some of these, for some of these people, that are just genuine charlatans. They're just getting attention, maybe contributions, maybe media, support, whatever it is. It's just gross. It's just gross and manipulating people along the way. Dave, the end of the world very well may be coming, but it's not because somebody properly interpreted the solar eclipse, the coming of the cicada invasion, the telling of the catastrophic earthquake of New Jersey. None of these things are signs of the end of the world.
Well, so this is what I was thinking on my way to the gym this morning. This is walking to the gym. Was Linus from Charlie Brown, was he the ultimate conspiracy theorist? Like think about him, like the Great Pumpkin. I mean, he spent in a whole episode talking about the Great Pumpkin, and he even convinced Lucy, his girl, like this is the Great Pumpkin is coming. And then when it didn't come, he was defeated, but then the next day he's back at it again.
Yeah.
Is Linus the representation of what we have today with QAnon, the end of the world? I don't know. That's what I was thinking. Would if they did Charlie Brown today, and they do have a Snoopy show on TV, um, but if Charlie Brown, if they redid that episode today, would it be about election denier? Would Linus be an election denier? You think?
Well, I mean, it's possible. I mean, but let's be fair, right? I mean, Linus Van Pelt, Lucy's little brother there, he was like four. So, right? I mean, he was a thumb-sucking, security blanket dragging, adorable little guy, right? So he might have, made some errors in judgment along the way with the Great Pumpkin and other ideas, but he was four, maybe five, right? It's a different thing when you're 56 and making those same wild ass statements, theories, and exaggerations, and when you're buying into the same end of the world prophecy. So he might, Dave, have been a foreshadowing of things to come. Thank you, Charles Schultz, with one of the most lovable cartoons and comics of all time, which, by the way, you can follow a Threads account that shares a Snoopy story from that day years ago every day, which is fun and nice to reminisce about. But I think we can excuse Linus. I don't think we can excuse, John Smith, conspiracy chaser.
Yeah, I think that's kind of interesting. I think there's a level of responsibility we all have to have here. And Andy, I'm just going to pull, and you mentioned about the cicadas, and the expected season this coming year. We had the earthquake last week as well, the big one in Taiwan. Uh, as media people, or if you're going to be on TV, don't we have a responsibility at some level to like try to quash some of this stuff? I know that doesn't happen because Fox News promotes conspiracies all the time. All the other news outlets at some point give credence to mis or fall into disinformation. But we had an instance where on the View last week, yes, or this week or whatever, one of the co-hosts blamed the solar eclipse, the earthquake, and the breeding season on climate change. I don't even know, like I can't even read further on this article to even like begin to understand and give any credence. Like, what is just a fucking asinine statement?
Yeah, so I thought this was pretty hilarious when I saw it, and to the credit, I know what the View is. I think I've seen it a couple times years and years ago. I don't watch it, but the host, and I don't know anything about this one of the several hosts host the View, right? There's like four or five ladies that
Yeah.
host the show, and so Sunny Hostin is the character in question. I don't know anything about her. I don't know her background, her story, whatever. But to the credit, at least some of her co-hosts sort of pushed back on her, as well as media from left and right, right? As this is being an absolutely insane moment. But yeah, she she was questioning, right, whether the eclipse and the earthquake that was felt in New Jersey, New York, and more broadly from there, and the cicadas that are emerging, if it's something to do with climate change. And I think, like, I could not imagine having been sitting alongside her as it's coming out of her mouth and not wanting to just be like, what the F are you talking about? You know, like it was an insane connection, but it was quickly pushed back on at least. Whereas with other shows and channels at times, you know, not only does nobody push back on the crazy ass things being said, but they encourage it, right? They fan the flames, they feed it and give it seriousness, right? They give the platform to Alex Jones, right? And they encourage the crazy ass things being said, the waste statements, Dave, we've talked about many times being said. So that's different. At least here, this was a stupid thing being said by somebody who was uninformed at best, but she was quickly corrected, right, in front of the national audience that heard the nonsense being said. Remarkable that it was said by somebody that's allowed to be on TV and espouse opinions and ideas, because like I would not go on that show and end of a conversation, but at least it was rejected. Whereas a lot of times it's not rejected, right? It's encouraged, right?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting part. It goes into a topic I want to cover next, but I do like, and it was good, Whoopi Goldberg, her of like her own controversial statements, and same with Joy Behar, and they both make some pretty crazy statements sometimes, and get called out appropriately for it. But we have this responsibility on some of these shows. I think really have to challenge and push back against some of these things. There was an article that you shared with me, Andy, from Axios, or I think that's how you say it, right? Axios.
Yep.
Just talking about like looking at it's called Behind the Curtain: America's Reality Distortion Machine. And basically what it's saying is, you know, or the premise of it is, what if we're not as divided as we think? Everyone, again, we have this movie Civil War coming out
Yeah.
this weekend, Andy. We talked about this on the podcast before, and everyone tends to think that we're heading towards a civil war. All the latest crisis is just one more peg or one more nail in the coffin that pushes us down that road. But just I'll just read a little of this. But yes, deep divisions exist on some topics, but almost every topic of monthly outrage, and I think that's important, monthly outrage, it's a fringe view or example amplified by the loudest voices on social media and politicians driving it. No, most Christians aren't Christian nationalists who see Trump as a godlike figure. No, most college professors aren't trying to silence conservatives or turn kids into liberal activists. No, most kids aren't don't hate Israel and run around chanting from the river to the sea. No, most Republicans don't want to ban all abortions starting at conception. No, immigrants who are here illegally aren't rushing to vote and commit crimes. No, most people aren't fighting on X. No, most people aren't cheering insults on Fox News and MSNBC in the evening. Turns out less than 2% of Americans are even watching. Um, and so I found that to be very interesting. And it
Yeah.
really puts a lot of things in perspective because as I was going through my X feed, I switched from the for you to following. I went to just the following, and these are people that in the news. When I first joined Twitter back 15 years ago, or however many years ago it was, um, the reason I joined it is because I wanted a news feed. I wanted something where I could get my news real quickly, see the headlines, and do it. What it became is this outrage machine where anybody with an opinion can do it. And I think that's where, the difference between for you, which is more the outlandish stories, the
Yeah.
more the people who you're not following, but the algorithm reads that this is what Dave Pound really wants to read versus the following, which is what I actually want to read. And I find myself less like I just in a better mood when I do it. Now, do sometimes I flip over to the for you? Sure, I do. But then I'm immediately reminded, I'm like, God, this fucking sucks over here. I need to move back to the following part. So what are your thoughts when you saw that article?
Yeah, so one, I think you raise an important point on social media, which is, for all the crap it gets, like you can very much control your experience on social media, right? As you were just talking to, Threads and Instagram now, I think they default to not including political content in your feed. You have to go and actively select, yes, I want political content to see. So there's a lot of ways to control what you see, but sometimes we like to feed our own flames, and that's what a lot of times what people do. But on this article, I think this article is right on, Dave. I mean, politicians and the media benefit when there's excitement and divisiveness, and they can get people fired up, right? Because if things are cool, that doesn't help, right? If things are cool, it doesn't help the challenging candidate. In this case, this year, Donald Trump, like make a case to elect him, right? Why change if everything's cool? And so for politics purposes and for the media to get people to dial in and watch the breaking story about nothing, it's got to be exciting, right? Excited and animated. And so that's what we hear and see a lot. But this article is absolutely right. Most Americans are pretty much in the same place. One, we're all sick of the excitement and politics and divisiveness of the media. But on all these issues, like most folks are pretty reasonable and open to like reasonable solutions, right? And reasonable compromise, recognizing that, most of us kind of accept the same basic things. Even like the example within the highlights, like 80% in total, right? 54% strongly support, 24%, somewhat support the right to keep and bear arms. One of the most divisive issues, right, that you hear about today with, folks on the left and right screaming, for no gun regulation, no gun control at all, or complete bans. Most Americans are in the middle and they say, hey, you should have the right to keep a weapon, but they're flexible maybe on some processes to manage that. So that's where most Americans are. But we have not only, Dave, the media and politicians, but as we talk about in other times, we've also got China and Russia and North Korea and Iran deliberately stoking these divisive issues and trying to get Americans excited to sow division and to have us question, even the stability of our own governance society, right? And so, I said this many times, I said this on my social media feeds and elsewhere, like today, it is patriotic to not overreact to stuff on social media, right? And to not buy into this us versus them mentality and all these issues, because we're being deliberately manipulated by US politicians, by our political parties, by the media that wants your attention, and by Vladimir Putin's boys, right? And so like it's an act of patriotism to slow down, take a breath, not engage in vitriol on social media, and just breathe and be calm and normal. And I think this article does a great job of highlighting some of that.
Yeah, I think that's really important. A lot of the things you call out, because look, I mean, a lot of these nation state actors, I mean, you mentioned a couple there, and plus we have some criminal groups as well who
Yeah.
always like to fan some of these flames. But their vested interest is our downfall, right? And that doesn't mean they care if it's Democratic or Republican or red, blue, state, whatever. They just care that the country fails.
Yeah.
And for as much as we have, political divisiveness at times, and it does look like tomorrow we're going to be on the Civil War, right? I mean, we've stood the test of time for over, since this country was founded, right? And unlike China, unlike Russia, who's had their highs and lows and have come and gone, this country has remained united, and it helps them get to what they're trying to do, is rise up in prominence. And a lot of those other countries have, no other best interest than to see us fail. Because China, look, I mean, we can say that they're this economic and military power. If you look at the underlying data behind all of what's happening in China right now, they're in a lot of trouble,
Yeah.
on a number of different reasons. Economically, from a growth perspective, I mean, obviously they've got the largest population in the world, or them and India are one and two. But they have a age problem there
Yeah.
too, and their one child policy really backfired on a number of levels, where they have communities with no females in them, and such. And so you have problems there. And Russia, we all know what's happening in Russia. I mean, despite what we think is working in Ukraine or not working in Ukraine, there's a lot of underlying activities there that show weaknesses and fractures. So it behooves them to target us and to try to create this divisiveness. So we have to be really mindful on those fronts. So I just found this article really interesting. I think it is important at the end of the time to, take a step back and think about, I mean, one, does what anybody says on social media really matter, other than to inflame your passions and get you agitated? And is that really healthy? We talk about, Arnold Schwarzenegger's Pump Club. I mean, the positivity there. I mean, he tells you to disconnect. I mean,
Yeah.
get away from it. I mean, he doesn't carry a phone. He does an iPad, for that reason. So he's
Yeah.
not connected all the time. And I think if we just thought about that for a little bit, I think it could make our situation a little bit better from a personal level, individual level, and from a community level as well. So I thought it was a great article. Thanks for calling that out, Andy.
Yeah.
I was glad you brought it up. So
And Dave, like Gen X, like we should be especially good at this, right? Because we are the most nonplussed up generation, the most like we don't care, blah blah blah, and your big story generation there is, right? Captured between the never ending reign of the boomers and the slightly, I think, more excitable millennials. Like we are a very calm generation comparatively, and so we should be the ones that can really sort of dismiss all this nonsense that comes out and try and keep a rational. I think everything you said was exactly right. And look, you get a lot more attention, whether you're a college student or Tucker Carlson, right? When you take these divisive, animated, loud, uh, excited issues, right, and positions, where when your average college kid, your average American, just sort of is like, hey, America's fucking awesome. Like it's the greatest place on earth. We've got nothing but great things going on here. Yeah, we've got our problems and challenges, but we can, there's so much more to celebrate and so much more to like nobody cares that you say that, right? But that's the truth, right? I mean, we've got problems, we've got issues, we're working through them, but this country's amazing, and it's just we often just take it for granted, which is unfortunate, unfortunate. But if I know there's other places you want to go, but yeah, very good article. I'll share that link out when we share the post too for this podcast. I think it's worth checking out, just remembering that there's far more that unites us than divides us, and people say it, but we don't oftentimes fully embrace that.
yeah, I'll just wrap on just saying this, Andy. When I have no longer a feed that has Tucker Carlson in it, that make my days inherently better. And guess what? I don't even miss it. Like it's great. So great. Okay, another social media thing I want to talk about, and this is another one. I appreciate you providing me material to work off of here, Andy. But this is another one of these. Maybe it's a burst bubble, or just new research out that there's this idea that, Andy, that too much screen time is going to kill your kid, and they're
Yeah.
going to do is become robots, and it's going to be like Wall-E, where all we do is watch our screen time. We don't exercise anymore. We become fat blobs in space, and all this other stuff. Well, there's this new report out, Andy, that actually uh, kind of, you know, pops a little bubble there. It says the
Yeah.
idea that teenage social media use is obliterating in-person time with friends is actually not correct. According to new research published in the Computers for Human Behavior, teens who spend a lot of time on social media will also log the most in-person socialization time. Furthermore, researchers found no support for the assumption that social media use predicts decline in social skills. Andy, I have a teenage daughter, a 17-year-old, and a 7-year-old. The 7-year-old is not so much on social media. We don't allow that for anything, but she's got a great friend group. She's got a
Yeah.
great, we schedule, opportunities for them, her and her friends to connect. But I will tell you, my 17-year-old, who we do think honestly spends so much time watching Netflix and doing all this other stuff in her room by herself. Um, there's also so much of her friends. Like, one of the things my wife and I really love is when her friends come over to our house,
Yeah.
and they're hanging out at our house, they're laughing, they're joking. Sure, they're loud, it is what it is, but at the same time, it warms kind of our hearts to see
Of
that,
course.
she's got great friends who come over. They're hanging out just like you and I did, Andy.
Yeah.
Yes, they're on their phones, and they're talking, but they're sharing commonalities around what people are talking about on the phone. And look, they come over for dinner, they raid our refrigerators, all the things that we did as kids too. But yeah, so they have a phone in their hand. So I thought this was an interesting article, and I think it does give, you know, hope that, not again, maybe it's this fake outrage. Oh, the screen time is going to kill your kids, and we're going to be decline as a country. It's probably not because of screen time as it is from other things that make us a community. So the
Yeah.
thoughts on that, man.
I think you're right on, Dave. I mean, there's always been, again, the panicked fear mongering of many folks, right? Going back to our youth, Dave, whether it was about Dungeons and Dragons, is going to make your kids worship Satan and bring upon the end of the earth,
So
or
forgot about that, Andy.
yeah, I mean, right, or it's just the kids were sitting in front of the TV, watching too much TV for hours on end, which we did at times, or kids were playing way too many video games and there was way too much violence in them. And we played a lot of video games, right? I mean, we did do those things. There was a lot of violence, right? Whether you're playing Contra on your Nintendo, right? Or Mike Tyson's Punch
Great game, Andy. Contra.
great game. I didn't have a Nintendo. My cousin had the Nintendo. I had a Sega because I've always been the one-off kid, but I loved it. But no, nonetheless, right? There's always been this pink, and we always, I mean, as long as technology has been around, kids have gravitated towards it, and we sat on our happy asses and enjoyed it, and like that hasn't changed. It's just a different medium that now some parents aren't familiar with, don't like, and yeah, there's some risks with it. I mean, you weren't watching porn at age 13 on your Nintendo, right? But that stuff was still out there in different ways. And so yeah, it definitely changed. There's always evolving, challenging concerns, but it's again, just like the cicadas and the eclipse. By the way, I looked up that host. She's a Notre Dame graduate with a law degree, right? That was talking about the eclipse and cicadas as climate change. Fascinating. But these things aren't signs of the end of the world. It wasn't for our generation, right? I listened to Van Halen growing up. Playing Van Halen backwards did not bring up devil lyrics that were going to condemn us all to hell. I mean, it goes back to the same fight. Dee Snider of Twisted Sister fighting on Capitol Hill with Tipper Gore and others about rock and roll music and how it's killing us, right? It's moral hyperbole and craziness. And social media, yeah, there's hazards, Dave. If you're responsible parents, you guys have made an informed decision with your youngest child when you let her gain access to certain things. Heaven forbid you're being responsible parents, making decisions in the way you think are best for your kid, which is the right thing to do. And that's just crazy that people want to overregulate, over legislate, tell everybody else how to live their lives. And this study that Elizabeth Nolan Brown highlights this in Reason Magazine. There's another good article, maybe a couple months back, saying while kids are doing some of these things, like you have to look at all the things that they're not doing compared to our generations when we were young, right? Teenage sex is down, teenage pregnancy is down, teenage violence is down, grades are up. Like there's a lot of good things happening too, right? Positive indicators as well. So there's a trade-off. and maybe it's not a bad trade-off, right? So as long as we can manage things in a healthy manner, parents can be engaged with their kids, right? Things are, again, Dave, I made the theme for today. The world is not ending. Eventually,
Eventually.
it's going to happen, right? Whether by faith or the earth blows up for for because eventually it's time to however you want to look at it, whether you're a person of faith or otherwise. Yeah, eventually the world's going to end, but not because of social media, not because of the eclipse, not because of cicadas.
Or in like Three Body Problem, because aliens come and conquer our planet. So
I mean, we haven't ruled that out yet. We haven't ruled that out
yeah,
yet.
we haven't ruled it out.
President Obama, Arnold Schwarzenegger, The Rock have all volunteered to be the individuals to go up and sort of greet the aliens as representatives of Earth. And I'm okay with any of the three of them, being the first contact, to be honest with you, right? I mean, Arnold suggested that him and The Rock do it together. I think we was talking to the Kelsey brothers on a recent podcast, and I'd be okay with that. I mean, if the first thing the aliens meet are Dwayne The Rock Johnson and Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'd be like, hell yeah, go represent us. So, but maybe, I mean, let's not rule out the alien invasion. It could have, or Will Smith, like Will Smith can go lead the counter strike against them, like an Independence Day.
Yeah, that's very true. Very true. Andy, let's wrap on a fun thing. Speaking of space, we talked about the Silver Surfer last time, I think.
Yes.
It's almost like we have a power to influence what's going to be reported in the news, Andy, because there's in the New York Post, there was an article about how NASA, look, we're spending a lot of time going back to the moon, right? Because that's going to be the launching point then to the launching point to Mars and beyond. Something that our great grandchildren will probably be experiencing, but not us in any way. But NASA photographed a sliver of a mysterious surfboard-shaped object near the surface of the moon
Right.
last month. Andy, the Silver Surfer may be real. Let's start that. Is the
Yeah.
Silver Surfer out there and just waiting to find his surfboard again? It's on the moon, Andy. It's on the moon.
So Dave, again, staying with our theme for today, the Silver Surfer would come to planets to warn them, right? That Galactus, the planet-eating, crushing hero that he was, would come and devour planets. That's what he consumed, right? He was the herald of Galactus. He would go and let people know Galactus is coming, and then Galactus would come and devour their worlds. Hey, the Silver Surfer's board being on the moon is clearly an indicator that he's circling our planet, probably trying to figure out who to make the contact with to let us know Galactus is on the way, right? Don't worry about cicadas. World-eating, I don't want to call him superhero, right? But intergalactic menace, Galactus is coming to devour the Earth. So I'm glad we've identified the surfboard. I'm glad we've confirmed the Silver Surfer is real, right? And or may I say she's real, Julia Garner, Silver Surfer, right? So whichever way it is, the Silver Surfer is pretty gender neutral. Well, let's just like, I mean,
Yeah, let's just say it. Gender.
I mean, he's pretty like Barbie doll down there, right? I mean, he's a completely naked silver person flying through space with no anatomically indicative, bits and pieces. So, like,
Would you say they're non-binary, Andy?
yeah, let's go that route, right? The Silver Surfer, the spaces, the intergalactic, non-binary superhero that he is, right, is coming to let us know the Galactus is en route to end the world, to consume the Earth. So now's the time. Sell your personal goods. Send a kind, generous donation to Dave, and I will keep you informed of what's happening with the Silver Surfer watch. And we'll all gather together, put on some cool sunglasses, and prepare for the end of the world as Galactus comes to eat us.
With that, Andy, I think that's probably a good way to wrap up this Waste Wednesday. We had some good wild ass statements, theories, and exaggerations, Andy. So it was fun. That was fun.
It was fun. It was fun. It's good to be back, Dave. Again, good to be back. We missed you on Friday.
I know, I know. It is good. It's good to be in your presence again as you're wearing the British Bulldog shirt, Andy. I did have a wrestling update, but we'll cover that later. I think that's probably a good thing to do for later in the week. All right, Andy. With that, I'll catch up with you next time.